Hey guys, it's Thorn. No, it's been a few weeks since I've posted a video. I've been super busy getting married. So anyway, we had a courthouse wedding, which is pretty awesome. And I've just kind of been getting settled and getting my life in order to kind of figure out what the next steps are. I'll be moving this summer and figuring out new job stuff and all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to pop in and make a video about gatekeeping. It's been on my mind, and it has become a topic on YouTube and Instagram recently with the circulation of some memes. And I've had this blog on my mind for a while. I don't know if it'll actually happen. It probably should. I communicate better with words, I think, written rather than spoken. So maybe give me a little bit and let it percolate more. But fundamentally, I think, well, first, so what I mean by gatekeeping first. Gatekeeping is the process by which we decide who gets to be an insider and who has to be an outsider. Whether we're talking about, political groups or religious groups or whatever. In this case, we're talking about witchcraft, and the central question is, as always, who gets to be a witch? What's a real witch? And this is something, if you go back through my videos, I've been on YouTube almost 10 years at this point, which by itself is really crazy. But if you go back through my videos in the last years, I've made several videos about witchcraft, authenticity, who gets to be a witch, and the language that we use from year to year changes, but the central issue is the same. So a few years ago, we were talking about Wicca versus traditional witchcraft, like who's really the real witch. Before that, in the 90s, in the very late 90s and the early 2000s, it was, well, who's really a Wiccan? Are they initiated or not? Right before that, are you in a coven? Are you solitary? There are always these questions about who gets to be inside and who gets to be outside. And currently, that conversation centers upon who is a real witch and who is an aesthetic witch, by which people mean, Becky who buys her sage at Whole Foods is the joke, right? That's the meme that's been floating around. This idea that anybody can get on Amazon and buy the Harmony Nice book and then go to their expensive grocery store and buy a smudge stick or whatever and call themselves a witch. And does that make it so? And it's not a conundrum that has an answer, okay? And I have really mixed feelings that I'm still wrestling with, because on the one hand, I've been practicing witchcraft for more than 20 years at this point, and I've seen various forms of this conversation in the past, and I've been on both sides. I've been the kind of desperate newcomer, really eager for somebody to talk to and show me the way, and dealing with conflicting sources, and people were really mean to me and telling me that I wasn't real and I didn't feel respected and that kind of thing. And then later on, when I started establishing myself in a local community and even participating with a coven and realizing that, well, now I was on the inside, so it was kind of okay to shit on other people who were on the outside. And I don't know, on the one hand, nobody owns the word. That's just true. That's true historically. That's true pretty much wherever you are, whoever you are at any time period. Nobody owns the word, okay? They're really, historically, there's no such thing as a true, authentic witchcraft. We can attach all the monikers we want to it, but basically, at some point, we're all kind of making our stuff up, okay? And that's okay. That's pretty much where religion comes from, as far as I'm concerned, okay? Whether you claim to be practicing some kind of ancient Cornish whatnot, or whether you're a traditional Wiccan or whatever, okay? At some point, somebody fabricated a lot of what you were doing, okay? They assembled it from pieces of folklore or trial records or their imagination or whatever, but there's no historian anywhere that will tell you that there's some unbroken lineage of real, authentic witchcraft that has been passed down to people practicing today. It's just not the case. So I think there are a lot of people who still kind of cling to these particular ideas, and there are a lot more people who take inspiration from that position, and I think that might be a different thing. But the argument that one tradition is realer or more authentic than another from a historical perspective it's just ludicrous, okay? If you are practicing witchcraft, identifying as a witch, defining it according to whatever terms you are, then there's nobody who can tell you that you're not a witch, okay? At least not based on anything objective. So, like, that's just how it is. And on those grounds, it doesn't make any sense to be criticizing particularly teenaged and early 20-something women for finding a kind of witchcraft that speaks to them, claiming it as their own, and promoting it on social media. Like, we can be assholes about that if we want to, but there's just no, like, objective, true reason to justify doing that. My third-degree Gardnerian whatever witchcraft is not objectively witchier than Becky with the good hair at the Whole Foods. Okay, like, just from an anthropological, religious studies perspective, you know, like, I can be upset about that all I want, like, as, you know, a traditional Wiccan, muckety-muck, whatever, but where does that get me, I guess? So, on paper, that's my feeling, okay? Nobody owns the term. And I think that when we actively try to exclude people, what we're really just doing is being jerks most of the time. That said, and this is where things get complicated for me, and I'm still wrestling with this stuff, okay? But that said, I think that we are up to something different. Just because we are using the same terms doesn't mean that we're doing the same thing. So, it's an offensive kind of joke, right? Like Becky with the good hair at Whole Foods with her sage bundle. But this is what I'm using because this is how people are speaking, okay? That person, who's usually a young woman, and she's usually online being criticized for being shallow. She gets her supplies from mainstream spaces, and her witchcraft is tame compared to what other people might be practicing, okay? At least that's what people say, right? Maybe she's really into the New Age or crystal grids or whatever, and she's really into, you know, body positivity and reclaiming her feminine power and her vagina and whatever. Like, that's the girl who's getting made fun of on social media for the most part when she calls herself a witch. And that's really shitty, and I think for a minute we should stop and think about the misogyny that's kind of inherent there, okay? But at the same time, I think that what she's doing is different than what the Gardnerian priest or priestess is doing, what the traditional witch is doing, what the person practicing hoodoo or Appalachian folk magic is doing. Like, I think even though some of these communities might use some of the same terms, or certainly many of them are lumped together, I think we're still doing something different. And I think that what a lot of people want is just a respect for that boundary. And it's insecurity, right? Like, sometimes I get freaked out. I think that might just be me getting older and changing. I can only imagine what it must have been like for Gardnerians in the 70s and 80s watching people reading books by Llewellyn and practicing Wicca in their bedrooms. You know, a lot of people were freaked out by that. the community changed a whole lot in the 90s and the early 2000s, and like I'm a product of Silver Ravenwolf's Teen Witch, which scared the fuck out of people in 1998, okay? People were telling me that I was ruining Wicca back in the late 90s. So, man, who am I to tell anybody else that they're doing the same, okay? But as a witch, having been in some of those newer spaces with this kind of new brand of witchcraft, energetically they are doing something different. Like I just feel that when I'm in their ritual spaces or their stores or whatever, like there's something else going on there. And in my mind, what I'm doing is I'm kind of thinking of them as not pagan. Like that's kind of fundamentally the difference. They tend to not be theists in the same way that me and mine are. They don't have the same kinds of festival experiences and community experiences. They tend to be like rabidly solitary, even in a way that like 90s Scott Cunningham Wiccans, you know, can't even really compare with. Like we're different. But it's not that those people aren't witches or that they're doing witchcraft incorrectly. I think it's a different kind of magic. I think it's a different kind of theology and a different kind of language that's evolved to meet the needs of young people today, that maybe a lot of our older traditions just aren't doing very well. Anyway, stuff that's been on my mind. So I'll leave you with a thought that, yeah, change is scary. I mean, like I said, I get uncomfortable myself, but generally speaking, it's always a great idea to try not to be an asshole. I have to work at that every day. It's weird, like you practice in a particular movement for decades and you think that's how it is, and then people start doing things in a way that feels really different, and it can be hard to come to grips with because it feels like you're being displaced. But, you know, I think that's just kind of par for the course. I try to think of it as exciting. I mean, it does mean that a lot more is more accessible for more people, including myself, which is really cool. So, I don't know, but we should stop passing around shitty gatekeeping memes, and I hope that those who are new to witchcraft, who are coming in through this kind of more youthful movement, will take the time to explore the work of the previous generation. It does dishearten me that so many of them seem to not be reading some of our classic texts. I say that as an author too, as much as a witch. I feel bad for them because they're missing out on a lot of really good stuff. But, you know, people said the same thing about us when we were reading Cunningham and Ravenwolf and Buckland, you know, in the 90s. So, anyway, that's all. I hope you guys are well, and I will talk to you later.